Hey everybody, welcome back to Bottomless Coffee. Once again, we are overseas, and I'm really excited for this conversation because instead of recontextualizing the themes that we usually talk about, this time we're going to talk about what it means to be an American from the perspective of someone who's actually left America, like left the country to live somewhere else. It should be really interesting. Now, I'm really interested in this idea of what it means to be an American. One, because I feel as though people are all often talking at me and telling me what it means to be an American, whether that's like politicians and their competing narratives about who real America is or what have you, or the idea of America that's kind of sold to us through like Hollywood movies and commercials and TV shows and the like. What I don't often hear are Americans talking with each other about who they want to be and how they want to be perceived by the rest of the world. So I'm hoping that we're able to explore that just a little bit today. But for the interest, for the general knowledge, the edification of people who don't know, there is an actual legal definition of who gets to be an American. So no matter where this conversation takes us, right, it's all somewhat speculative, maybe just a little abstract, because the legal definition is really simple. It's in the Constitution. I'm just going to read it to you. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. So, children of Americans, if you were born in America or under an American flag, or if you go through the naturalization process, you are American. That's it. That's it. So to a large extent, all that extra conversation is unnecessary, but we can't pretend like it doesn't happen, right? So I am really excited to introduce a really wonderful friend with just great fashion sense. He's a supporter. He is one of the very first Patreon community members. He helped with our website that is looking better than ever, faster than ever. After this, we should talk about our like 99 score on Google's page loader thing. But he left to become, I don't know, to become an Australian. I think we'll find out together. Welcome, Nick Pasquariello. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm great, I'd say. It's always really great to see your face. We don't get to see each other often because you moved to the other side
Yeah,
of the world. I don't think it would be possible for you to be farther away.
I know. Yeah, I think you're actually the last person to visit me out here in
Oh,
Australia. Yeah.
and it took me forever to do so. So how long ago did you move?
It was July of 2015. So
Okay.
almost 6 years.
Okay. Wow. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's a really long time.
Yeah, it was
I
right after I
remember.
finished
Go
school.
ahead.
It was right after I graduated from tech.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
where I went and where
Oh,
our occasional co-host Brendan also went. Um, I remember I used to make it my New Year's declaration resolution. I was like, I'm gonna visit Nick. I'm gonna go to Australia, and it took me like two or three of them to
yeah.
actually make it happen.
Yeah. So many people have like just they're like, oh, caution to the wind, I'm gonna do it. And then, years later they finally do it. But um yeah, you made it. We had a lot of really good time. You got engaged out here.
I did. Oh my gosh. How funny that you remember that. And I'm like, oh yeah.
Right? Because I think
Bondi Beach.
both of you secretly came up to us separately and told us that you were gonna propose. And then it was
Oh.
like, oh, they're both gonna propose to each other, and then one of you did, or like something weird like that. It was funny.
Oh, that's so cute. I didn't know he did that. I'm gonna talk to him later. Well, spoiler alert, I said yes. He did propose. It was very casual on Bondi Beach in Sydney. You're in Brisbane, but we went to Sydney while we were there. That's where he proposed. I said yes. Then we had a nice walk along the cliffs, and then we got some beer and burgers, and we've continued to have beer, burgers, and coffee ever since.
Lovely.
A true romantic tale.
Yeah, that was my
Now,
first time meeting Aaron.
oh, well, a lot of people haven't met him, unfortunately. Um, he's only been to Atlanta, where I would say the largest part of my network is a couple of times. A couple of
Yeah.
times. But, he's beloved as far as I'm concerned. In my mind, everyone knows him, everyone loves him, very good friends. If anything ever happens to me, he can move to Atlanta and everyone will take care of him.
Oh, 100%, 1,000%.
But he would probably prefer to move to Australia. Um,
He's very welcome.
Now, we were talking a little bit before we started recording, and you were telling me that Australia is the first country outside of America you ever even visited.
No, well,
Oh,
it was the Bahamas first.
okay.
But it wasn't until I met my partner, who is British, but his family lives in Australia. Oh, look, he's calling me now. I'll call him back later. Um, where he kind of inspired me to, he was very worldly. He inspired me to, we went on a cruise together, very worldly,
Hmm.
to the Bahamas. And then later that year, I went and came to Australia and did my working holiday visa. So worked out here for 4 months,
Okay.
took a semester off, and then a year later moved here.
Okay. So, whose idea was it? Yours or your partner's? For you to go to Australia first?
Well, okay. So when I met Alex, my partner, um, I he's British, so I was like, "You're from England, right?" And I, for some reason, was always obsessed with Australia. Like my grandmother went there when I was in second grade, um, because we have some distant cousins who live in Melbourne.
Okay.
And she came back with like all this Australian stuff and kangaroos and all this stuff. And I was like, that sounds so cool. And I just always wanted to go to Australia for some weird reason.
Huh.
And so I had this map of Australia in my room just hanging on the wall. And, when he came over,
Uh
he
huh.
saw that and was like, why is there a map of Australia on there? And I was like, oh, I've just always wanted to go there. And he's like, oh, I live there. And I was like, you're British. You don't live in Australia. And he's like, no, my family, migrated there when I was 17. I was like, oh, that's so cool. And so we kind of just started talking about, going back there and visiting. Um, and so it was kind of a joint effort. But I was always ready to come to Australia.
Yes, it sounds like from a very, very young age, you'd
Yeah.
already been thinking about Australia. Tell me what, aside from kangaroos and, uh, Crocodile Dundee or something, what was your? Did you when
Um,
you thought about moving to Australia, right? Because you had that map
yeah.
there. So maybe as a kid or what have you, what did you think Australia would be like? And how would it be different from your life in America?
It's a really good question. I it might have just been the kangaroos.
You do
um,
like animals a lot.
I am a really big animal person. And I love, yeah, like koalas, kangaroos. Like I would live at the zoo if I could here. Like it's just oh, we almost made it to the zoo, but then it was
Yeah.
pouring down raining. Do you remember? I was so
Yeah.
disappointed for you
Steve
guys.
Irwin's zoo.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But I always thought it'd be cool just because I've always seen so much beautiful photos of Australia. Like the beaches and the lifestyle. And yeah, kind of does live up to some of its expectations. It is a very beautiful country. It's like 90% of the population lives, 20 kilometers from the coast or something like that.
And just as a way to gauge what I'm discovering was an obsession with Australia that you had. Um, did finding out that your partner, that his family lives in Australia, did that make him more attractive to you as a partner? Did that have some influence in your decision to get more serious in your relationship?
I mean, it definitely was a nice thing. Like, it didn't subtract from it.
Okay.
I don't think it was like the only reason I was with him. Like,
Yeah.
I think just him being very worldly. Like, I love America, but I've always wanted to just travel and kind of experience a lot of different cultures and see the world from different perspectives.
Yeah.
And here he was, who he's when he was like 15 or 16, his family just took a trip around the world. They took a year off and just went everywhere, really.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, I've just, it's been, it was attractive to me at the time.
Okay. So that was so we did very young idea of Australia. Then
Hmm.
we got a little bit older. Maybe your partner told you a little bit more about it, and then you spent some time there on your work visa. Now, you learned a little bit more about like the real Australia. You learned there was more than kangaroos or what have you. That's probably where you
Yes.
picked up the fact that so many people live along the coast, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you, when you were there for your work visa, did the idea come into your mind where you're like, oh, I could live here?
Um, the funny thing is that we, on our work visa, we were going around to different kind of rural areas and
Okay.
talking to people about a new college that opened up in town. And these were just very middle Australia sort of towns, like nothing glamorous, like very
Huh.
kind of hick, if you will.
Okay.
um, but like it was really interesting to see my expectation of what I thought Australia was going to be, and then what it really was. And so I kind of got
Mm-hmm.
to experience it from a different level, like not the glamorous side of it. Um, but I was still like really intrigued by the people and the culture and how um, how kind of normal they were too. Like I think I was expecting something a bit more European, like a bit more.
Sure.
I don't know, like not that I spent a lot of time in Europe, but there was a lot of similarities. Like you know, they had a like rednecks, right? We say rednecks in America as
Mm-hmm.
a kind of a term to describe certain people, and they kind of have a similar thing, and they call people bogans, and it's like, oh,
Huh.
it's very similar. Like they just like, and people kind of self-identify as that. It's a funny term to be thrown around sometimes, but it's a lot of similarities I kind of saw in the two countries,
Yeah.
um, but a lot of differences too.
A lot of similarities. Not necessarily positive similarities, but
Yeah,
similarities.
yeah, yeah,
Like, oh, I can navigate this society. Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
kind of, yeah.
Yeah. So then you came back. Um, and now you live there full time. You became an Australian citizen. What was the process of becoming an Australian citizen like?
um, it was a very long process. So we did it the way that we did a partner visa. So
Okay.
this was before marriage equality was passed here. So,
Hmm.
but they allowed same-sex partners to 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 apply for partner visas still then.
Okay.
So we did that. I was on a bridging A visa for a year and a half, which is like kind of the interim period, and then I finally got the partner visa. But the partner visa is really just a path to permanent residency. So you have to apply again after you get that partner visa to
Okay.
become a permanent resident, which is like another year, year and a half to get that. And that was super exciting when I got that, because that means, I can live here indefinitely.
Yeah.
But I would have had to, so with the permanent residency, you have to live here for 3 out of 5 years. Like, so it's a 5-year term. And if you live here for 3 out of the 5 years, you can renew your visa to
Okay.
come back, or to stay. And so I really didn't know what my future was going to look like. And I wanted the option to go home and kind of always come back here. And
Mm-hmm.
so I kind of took that extra step and went and got the citizenship, so that, I am able to come back. If I could go home for 5 years, I can still come back here.
Wow. Well, I think I have to say congratulations on your citizenship. I think there are some early questions like, are you a dual citizen now? Is that how this
Yes.
works?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dual citizen.
And,
So,
we talked
um,
about the legal definition of American. I don't
yep.
know the legal definition of Australian, but I know you meet it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, do you consider yourself to be an American, an Australian, or both?
I feel like since Australian citizenship is really so new, I don't really identify with it yet. I only got it in January. Um,
Okay, no, that's
and
that's good. That's good because
yeah,
my next question is,
yes.
um, what is the difference that you kind of feel between being an American
Hmm.
in the not legal sense and being an Australian in the not legal sense? Because strictly speaking, you should feel like you are both, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But you don't. So there's
No.
something there.
I mean, I guess it's kind of the obvious point of not being born here, not being raised here, feeling a bit othered in that sense. But like
Okay.
just separate in some ways of, not being a true blue Aussie, if you will. Um,
Okay, we
that's a
might have
saying
to
they have
explore
here.
that a little bit
Yeah.
more,
Yeah.
because I know that you are very close to your family. For
Yeah.
instance, like
Yeah.
you just mentioned it. That was just your family and getting to see them was a big
Yeah.
consideration in becoming a citizen.
Yep.
Um, and so, is part of it that your family is in the United States rather than with you in Australia?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I feel like that would be a huge component of it. Like, yeah, my family, I feel like I can never be fully settled unless I'm kind of close to them, like it kind of feels
Uh
that way. I know, I know. I chose the
oh.
wrong place to go. I really didn't think I'd be here that long. I just didn't. And it just kind of kept going, you know?
Yeah.
Um, it was like, oh, I'll do another year. Let's see another year, another year. And then I'm like, 6 years later, I'm still here. But also, there's also the fact that like Alex's family live here, which is great, but they're not Australian either. So it's not like,
That's true.
I mean, some of them have got citizenship, but some of them are just permanent residents. Um, but yeah, it's not like I have a Australian family here that kind of can uh, show me the way.
And
But
I
I
think
have a
that's
lot of
kind of
Australian.
helping us figure out, like, from your perspective, what it means to be an American, right? Like,
Yeah,
part of it must have to do with where your family is and maybe where you grew up. Um,
yeah,
and that seems to carry more weight than where you're living now, even though you've been there for 6 years, which is a pretty good percentage of your life.
yeah, that's true. I still like everyone always asks like if I'm Canadian here because
Oh,
my
really?
accent doesn't sound. Yeah, they're always like, well, two reasons. one is I think my accent doesn't sound anything overly obvious. They're looking for the Southern accent. They're looking for the Valley Girl California accent. They're looking for the Midwestern or the, New York accent. Like it's like all very like Australia's consumed a lot of, American media, so they just
Yeah.
kind of know a bit about it. So they're like, "Oh, you're Canadian?" I'm like, "No, no, I'm actually from America." And they're like, "Oh, sorry, I didn't want to assume," you know?
Oh.
And I get that. I got that. I get that so much, so much. And no one thinks it's offensive to be like, "Oh, I didn't want to assume you were the worst person in the world and you're American."
Really?
But the reason they say is they're like, "Oh, no, 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 it's not American. If you call a Canadian American, they get really offended."
Oh, okay. Wow,
Yeah,
there are some real layers here.
lots of layers.
Have you ever gotten like a deep dive into why Canadians get offended to be called Americans?
I think, yeah, I've talked to some Canadians, but I think this is just very limited,
Yeah,
some conversations
conjecture.
I've
Let's
had.
speculate.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
doing a broad thing here, but like, I feel like Canada kind of lives in America's shadow. It just,
Hmm.
it is always kind of a little overshadowed by its like, downstairs neighbor, if you will.
Okay.
And a lot of people just think that Canada and America are the same place sometimes.
So after people find out that you're American, do they make other assumptions about you?
Um, I'm sure they do. Australians are very like casually racist or like
Oh.
casually bigoted. It's not they they don't really they haven't lived kind of like through, I don't know. It's a different culture, and like a lot of people will just say things that they don't think about, and they
Hmm.
don't think like, oh, this would not be a good thing to say in this situation. Like jokes and different things, and also the amount of times a white Australian has just dropped the N word and just
Oh.
thought nothing was wrong, and I'm like, oh, this is weird. This
Yeah.
is not
Yeah.
okay. Like you can't be saying that word, and it's changed in the last 6 years too. Like in the
Hmm.
last year, I've seen people change a lot. Like especially with what's been happening in America with race, and I think
Okay.
people are
So you
getting a
mean
lot more
they
sensitive about it.
I'm gonna just structure that a little bit because you're saying
Yeah,
it's changed a lot, and so I'm guessing you mean like the Australian, like the way that they deal with race, or the way that they think critically, maybe a little bit more now about what they're
yeah,
saying and what they're doing,
yeah,
changed from the murder of George Floyd and the
yes.
protests. And for anyone that's just cluing in, that happened like right over there for me.
For anyone listening from the past,
And so, wow, it is crazy to think that something that happened a mile or two away from me has
Mm,
impacted the lives of millions of people on
yeah,
literally the other side of the world. Wow, that's
yeah. We had
unexpected.
there was a Black Lives Matter march after George Floyd died.
Yeah.
That was I think it was something like 10 to 14,000 people in Brisbane came, and it was massive, and it was right when COVID was happening too.
Hmm.
And I think it was deemed like illegal, like no one was supposed to be there, but everyone showed up, and it was nonviolent, and it went really well. But it was just really kind of shocking to see how many people showed up, and it was really nice to see that much
That's
support for
a
that.
beautiful show of what I'm gonna assume is more allyship, because when I visited you, I did not see a lot of other Black Americans that were there. So,
Yes. Well, Black Lives Matter here kind of takes on a different tone, as in it's a lot about like First Nation Aboriginal people here.
okay,
Um, so we have an issue here where there are a lot of, I guess, like deaths in custody of First Nation people.
Oh, really?
Yes, and that's been happening for the past 30 years, and it's just more. It's more than the average. It's more than it should,
Mm.
and so that's kind of the rallying cry here that they have and have been equating kind of to kind of America's awakening. So it's been happening in America, and everyone's kind of been obviously more sensitive to race and equity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then also looking at where we can do better and like the police system here.
So I know, um, so I for sure your brother, who designed the logo on the hat, and if you've seen
Yeah,
any of the videos, you guys I've shown you the logo before, and your sister have all done like activism work,
yeah.
for racial equity, and is that something that you expected to continue when you went to Australia, or is it just kind of a, I don't even want to say a pleasant surprise that you get to engage in that same type of activism, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I do know what you mean. Like, yeah, you think like, oh, I'm moving somewhere else. Like maybe there isn't racism here, or maybe
Wouldn't
there
that be
isn't
a dream?
anything. Yeah,
Maybe I would
right.
also move.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's everywhere. Like it really, I mean, it's colonialism, like
Hmm.
Australia is a penal colony, and we're still part of the Commonwealth. We still are under the Queen. We still have her on our money and coins and such. So like it's not it's we haven't escaped that, and I don't know if I expected to not deal with that. But um, yeah,
Yeah,
it's here.
that's that is a lot to unpack, and I'm really happy that they've got you there, um, to kind of help them along the path. You know, when you said, "Hold on, that's not okay. You can't actually say that." You haven't listened to the anti-racism episode yet, but that is the
Mm.
exact example that Colin cites, in an anti-racist moment when he told Brendan that even though Kanye West's like "Gold Digger" is playing on, over the loudspeakers in the club, like you don't get.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
the language he used wasn't "you don't get to say that." It was more like, "I need you to understand how it makes me feel when
yeah,
you, as someone who cares about me, uses that language."
yeah,
And who knew that it would be so resonant, across the globe? I'm
yeah,
surprised. I'm surprised.
yeah, yeah,
Now, I imagine, like when you think about what it means to be an American, you know, now that we are all deeply engaged in critical race theory, that's part of it, right? That's part of what this big
yeah.
mess of what it means to be an American. Are there any like last thoughts on what it means to be an American or what it means to be an Australian before we go to a coffee break?
Um, last thoughts. I'm just thinking out loud of um, I think big difference of Australian and America is kind of there's a difference of work ethic, I think.
Oh,
Um,
sure.
which is not to say like Australians don't work hard. It's more like um, Australians aren't used to killing themselves for a minimum wage job. Like
Yeah.
it's not as um, like there's so many differences in pay. The minimum wage here is like $21, $22 or something like that. And there's less of a stigma of like working like working in a movie theater, like
Oh,
it's not a high school job here. It's like anyone could do that, and that could be your actual career. Like, and no one's gonna be like, get a real job. Like it's very um yeah, it's
so
very different.
so you don't really, okay. Okay. So when you say that to me, what I'm hearing is that Australians are paid a living wage, like no
Yes.
matter the work, right?
Yeah.
Because when people are like, get a real job, they mean get a job that can actually pay the bills that you have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and well, at least that's what I'm interpreting them to mean. And so, do you not hear like living wage political arguments in Australia the way that we have them from the progressive left in the
N-
states?
not as much. No.
Oh,
Like it's
interesting.
very much like the government takes care of you here. If you don't have a job, they'll pay you. If you and for as long as you don't have a job, they're going to just give you money. Like
Hmm.
it's it feels like being an Australian feels like my government here has my back and is really gonna look out for me most of the time if, something happens. Like if, the worst happens, I'm gonna be okay. And I
Yeah.
don't feel like that at all in America.
Huh.
Yeah.
Now, you've been there. I think you said 6 years. Have you been there through like progressive? I guess I don't know. I don't know how your political parties are divided. Like through conservative, like the equivalent of like conservative and progressive parties taking leadership of the country, or has it been a steady
I
one party
think
control?
I think since I've been here, it's been one party. But
Okay.
what happens is the parties, when they feel like they're not doing well, is they'll shuffle the prime minister. So they'll like take this person down and put another leader
Sure.
head to their party. So they're essentially changing the prime minister of the country. Um, the Liberal Party has been in power for the last, I think, 7 years or however long it's been. And when I say liberal, the Liberal Party is the conservative party here,
Oh.
and the Labour Party is more the kind of liberal. They're both very center left, center right, like there's nothing really like the Republican Party here, except for there's like an Australian First Party that's like very racist and very awful. And
Oh,
they're kind of a
like our
tiny,
Republican Party. Yeah.
like our Republican Party, exactly. But there's only like, like 2 seats they hold or something like that versus 50 or whatever it is in America.
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah, so it's
we haven't talked about this on the podcast yet, but when I first was planning stuff out with Brendan, 100 years ago, he really wanted to bring the perspective when he thought he would have more time to do so. Bring the perspective of like the from the global progressive movement as opposed to the American progressive movement, which is like you were saying, center left.
yeah,
The
yeah, yeah,
things that we hear here that people tell us are radical, like
yeah,
everyone else already has.
yeah. It's like the Democratic Party is probably like the party that's in power right now. So it's like,
Yeah.
you're starting there, and then the other party's going more the other way. And then you have the Greens who are going a lot more to the left and are actually gaining a lot of momentum here,
Hmm.
which is really interesting to see. Yeah.
And so you really like that the government in Australia has your back in this way.
Yeah, I mean, between like the financial job assistance and Medicare here, it's like I could get cancer tomorrow and lose my job, and like I wouldn't be homeless, like it
Hmm.
would be I would probably be okay. No.
So you still feel like more of an American, but you prefer the way that they do things in Australia.
Yeah. Yes,
Oh,
definitely.
okay.
Yeah.
However you want to thread that needle, I'm fine with that. Let's take a quick coffee break because I'm not sure how long we've been talking.
Yeah. Sorry
And
about
we'll be
that.
right back. And we are back with Nick Pasquariello. Oh my gosh, Nick, I do this every time. Nick, what is your Instagram so you can plug it?
My Instagram is what if Nick.
What
Uh,
if Nick?
what if Nick? And I'm pretty sure I'm what if Nick everywhere. So Twitter
Okay.
and such.
Fabulous. During our coffee break, you started taking notes on more political differences that you really want to highlight. I can tell you've got a lot of passion in this area. I could tell when I first saw you in that fantastic T-shirt that you were game for some political conversation today. And
Yes.
right now, the world,
For those of
America's.
you
Oh, go
for
ahead.
those of you who can't see, I'm wearing Jerome's T-shirt for his political campaign.
And I'm smiling really big about
Yes.
it. um, so this is going to be an awkward segue. I'm smiling really big about it, but COVID is still happening.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
it's happening. It's America's turning a corner. Much of the world is not turning that same corner, and from what I was reading in the news and what I was kind of feeling some FOMO over in your Instagram stories and the like, Australia did a really good job of protecting its citizens and saving its businesses and kind of weathering the crisis. And that's largely due to a lot of government programs that were there. And it sounds like you are here to fill us in on what some of those
Yes.
programs were, because that can really illustrate, I think, for a lot of our listeners, like where the American government, at least under our last president, did not step up in a way that they could have.
I'm here to spill the tea.
Please.
Yes, yeah. COVID here, um, experiencing COVID here versus what I see everywhere else in the world has been like a treat, I guess. Like
Oh my gosh.
as in it's been probably a cakewalk compared to other countries. What Australians' approach has been to the pandemic has been, let's lock down if we have high cases, right? And a lot of countries have done that. And honestly, I feel like we've just gotten lucky a lot of the times.
Hmm.
But every time, there's any surge or any cases out there, we just kind of lock down, shut everything off. We turn on the mask mandates, and everyone kind of just hunkers down, works from home for however long. And in the beginning, it was like the first month and a half, and then restrictions lightened up, and everyone thought everything was over. And then the second wave came, and we locked down again. But recently, like we'll have one or two cases come, and we'll just do like a 3-day lockdown. Everyone just shuts down for 3 days and kind of
Oh.
just comes back. Yeah, so they'll do kind of smaller ones, which kind of just make everyone. It just kind of like stops spreads. I don't. I'm sure there's a lot of scientists who can say a lot more things about those.
Sure.
But like they'll put in like no dance, like you can't dance at the club for a little while, because they're just trying to like stop the spread. So they'll do like certain things, like everyone, like right now no one has to wear masks. Tomorrow I'm going to like Big Gay Day. Oh no, on Sunday it's Big Gay Day, which is like this big gay festival. Going to be a lot of people, and we've been able to do this because they've done so many tests, and they've really tracked it. We also we do contact tracing here. So every time you go to a restaurant, you have to check in and say that you've been there. So there's a little QR code. You scan it on your phone, and you say, "Yep, I'm checking in. I've been here." And all these restaurants, like they really kind of push it because there's like a $5,000 to $10,000 fine if they're caught like not following the rules.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like everyone's very strict about it, but we are also, because we're so strict about it, we're able to live a almost normal life through the pandemic. There's also an app that they came out with that just does like it just checks your Bluetooth and also Bluetooth on other people's phones. So if you both have the app and you cross contact with each other, you're in the same vicinity for 15 minutes. It says, okay, these people were in contact in some way, right? So if I come out and I say I have COVID, and you would alert the authorities, they would go in the app and they would be like, okay, whoever's been in contact with you, we're going to alert them and say, hey, go get a test. And so, or if, if I had COVID and I went to the local ice cream shop and I checked in there and I got my ice cream and I left, and they would contact everyone who was there in the vicinity. They would contact the employee,
Yeah.
and they would make everyone get tested. And so they also do, if you fly in from somewhere, you have to do like a mandatory 2-week quarantine in
Is
a
that still
hotel.
happening?
That's still happening. Yep.
Oh, wow.
So all of our new cases right now are coming from like hotel quarantines.
Okay.
So people flying in from other places, and they spend 2 weeks in the hotel, and then those are usually how the breaches. I don't know if that's the right word. Some of the cleaners for the hotels have caught COVID through cleaning people's rooms.
Sure.
So, and that's how it's been getting out sometimes. There was one guy in Melbourne who he was a security guard for one of the hotels and actually ended up sleeping with one of the people in quarantine, and then went to this big like Ramadan festival with like 5,000 people and just spread it to everyone. And so Melbourne was locked down for a really long time because of that, but they finally got it under control. We've only had 910 deaths here.
In Australia or
in Australia?
Oh my gosh. We had more than that in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Like I think we were up to 7,000 in Minnesota.
Yeah.
That's wild. And maybe if we take another coffee break, maybe I'll look up the populations so we can see like a rate of what that looks like. Let me ask, when you talked about outbreaks and lockdowns and what have you, how many people, if you have an idea, would need to be tested and show positive in order to trigger like one of those 3-day lockdowns?
One time in January, we had one person have it who was a cleaner for the hotel, and it was the UK strand, so they were being a bit more cautious. But I was in Canberra for the time, and I had to fly back from Canberra to Brisbane because they basically Canberra was like, everyone from Brisbane leave or lock down immediately for 2 weeks.
Oh.
So we had to go back. But yeah, it was one person, and it was a 3-day lockdown for that.
So for those 3-day lockdowns, is it business as usual? What are those restaurants compensated by the government somehow? Like,
it's usually So businesses will be compensated for certain things. Not every. I don't know about a 3-day lockdown. I don't know if they'll compensate them for that. But when it was worse, when in the beginning when we had 2-month lockdown or 1.5-month lockdown, they did this scheme called JobKeeper, and it was all around keeping the businesses open and propped up, but they were still closed. Like no one was going into the restaurant, and all the employees were on standby. So the government was paying the employees JobKeeper, so a certain amount, and then they would be giving money to the business to keep the business open. So it was because what I think happened in America a lot of times is they've laid everyone off, right?
Right.
And then they've closed business, or they've just shut down for a little while, and then when they're ready to open again, all those people they laid off found something else, because they're like, why would they wait around for this job? So a lot of businesses have done that, where they just, because it's when they're ready to open back up, it's like those people are ready to come back on, so they can just be right back to where they were. I don't know.
That makes so much sense. That makes so much sense to me, and it boggles my mind that we don't have anything in place, because when COVID did start happening, you are absolutely right. Huge amounts of people got laid off, and they were expected to then go and file for these government programs that like or seriously underfunded by the same people who were saying that they wouldn't like institute a JobKeeper program or anything similar, who didn't want to do any kind of lockdowns, and it's a very different mentality.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I wish I had the luxury of
and it's also like a very different, like when we go into lockdown, people complain, people say this and that. There are people who protest too, like who anti-maskers and this and that, but it's really a lot less than like America or somewhere else, I think, because Australians really trust their government, which is a rare thing. I mean, they don't trust them with everything. They really feel like, I think that the government at the end of the day kind of has their back. Like they're looking out for them. And it's so shocking to have a government that is actually feels like it's for the people, like it's there to help people out who are in need, like why is that a foreign concept for me? Like why is America like, is it just every time I see like American politics, it's just another Republican trying to take away more things from people who don't have anything. Like it's just mind-boggling.
Yeah. Let me speaking of politicians then, I can hear that the system in Australia is set up in a way that sounds like it does work a lot better for people. Do Australians view their politicians the same way that Americans typically view a lot of their politicians?
Okay, Australia treats their politicians like America treated their politicians in the 90s or the 80s. Like as in like they're there, we like them, we don't like them, we don't really care that much. Like it's like it's not so charged as like I mean, I was a kid in the 90s, but I'm assuming like politics used to be really, really boring in America. Like no one really like it wasn't the glitz and the glam and not glitz, but like the drama that it is right now.
Yeah.
That's kind of like it's when it's kind of the point where it's like everything's going okay, so we're not like going crazy about anything,
I miss those days.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too.
Huh.
But people like voting is mandatory here. So people don't people aren't as like I'm this side. Like people really kind of float in between the three parties or four parties. Like so you have the Liberals who are the Conservative Party, you have the Labour who's the more liberal party, a lot more about unions and such.
So Liberal is your conservative, Labor is your we'll say progressive. Sure. So that's because we don't get the terminology confused. Keep going.
And then the Greens would be, more progressive than Labor.
Liberal, Labor, Green. Okay.
And then we have there's some other ones, but the Pauline Hanson, she's the head of the I think it's Australian. Oh, it's called One Nation. And
sure, we don't have to talk about them.
No, we don't have to talk about them. They're like the Republican Party of Australia, like,
right?
And they're fringe. They're like fringe, they're like fringe right, and no one takes them seriously,
Well, do you think that Australians in general, and this is a charged question, I think, do you think they might just be like less self-interested than Americans in general, seem to be?
Yeah. What do you mean by self-interested?
Well, when like with the mask mandates, right? It was the protests were like, I have a right to get my hair done. I have a right to get my nails done.
Yep.
That kind of they were like, I want my life to continue the way that it was. And I don't really care if other people get killed along the way or whatever. That's like the risk they run in America. The same way I run that risk. risk.
Australians aren't so much like freedom or liberty. Like they're more like, let's look out for our mates, like let's look out
Yeah.
for our
Okay.
common man. They really they have a pretty good community kind of idea of what community is. We need to look out for each other. But
Oh my
on the
gosh.
other side of that, it's like there's this thing here called like tall poppy syndrome. I don't know if that's, do you know what that means?
I have
So
no idea what that means.
it can also be, I've heard it said as crabs in a bucket, which is like if you are too much of an individual, kind of, or you bring too much attention to yourselves,
Hmm.
everyone else kind of drags you down a little bit.
Oh,
Like,
really?
oh, that person's being way too much, Like we kind of see this in the gay community sometimes too, right?
Sure, sure.
Where it's like, oh, you think you're gonna be that good? No, like it's about like so all the poppies are this length and this one grows a little bit higher and then you kind of cut it down to fit the
Oh,
rest.
funny.
That's the idea. And then the crabs in a bucket is if you put a bunch of crabs in a bucket, you don't have to put a lid on it because if one tries to get out, the rest of them grab onto it.
Wow.
Yes, so it's kind
Like
of
the
like it's a different, like there's not as much
yeah.
individualism, I guess, here, where
Yeah.
it's like my liberty and da da da, I have the right to do X. It's more. I mean, some people are like that, but I feel like it's a lot more community focused. But it has that kind of caveat of like, oh, don't be too much.
Right, right. Oh, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
So, well, thinking about what we've learned about Australia
yeah.
and how we've reminisced on America today. Uh, for you, so say your family was not a factor, right? Because I know they're like it sounds like they're the biggest part of you that's still associated with being American. Like, what would need to change in America for you to be like, oh, okay, I am coming back? Like, what would we need to do differently?
Um, uh, um, that's. I mean, I really, I feel like, okay, I feel like it's something to do with like money in politics. I think is just ridiculous. It's like
Hmm.
how people can just get away with that.
Yeah,
Like trickle down economics, I think is all very, very ridiculous.
it
One of the
is.
big
It
things,
is ridiculous. Yeah.
one of the big things is like Medicare, really, like healthcare. Having globalized healthcare, I think, is huge, and it really changes, I think, the culture of the people because I
Hmm.
feel like it's people just don't have to stress every day about it. Like it's just you hear so many stories and um
I'm
okay
I'm
because
hearing like, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
because okay so because there's globalized healthcare here in this country, the government has a financial incentive to make the people of its country healthier.
Hmm.
So you'll see an ad on TV that's just about eating veggies, and it's sponsored by the Queensland government, and you're just like, what? Why? Like, and it's like, I mean, just becoming coming from being an American here, and
Yeah.
and like the price of a pack of cigarettes is $40 here.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
the price
Oh
of
my
alcohol
gosh.
is at least double what it is in America. So
I
it's like
do remember that.
across the board, everything is a lot more expensive, which isn't a great thing. But they're doing it because they're trying to they tax these, the alcohol industry, the tobacco industry, very, very highly because they have to kind of subsidize their own Medicare. Be
Yeah.
like, if you're going to cause the problem, we gotta also
Yeah.
try and fix it on the other side. And also by raising the price, it de-incentivizes people to drink as much, to smoke as much, and so by that, they'll be more healthy. And I feel like even the food industry is completely different. You just can't put certain things in foods. It's like um, the grade of meat is higher, like different, like it's just like Taco Bell when they came here, they had to completely revamp their menu because nothing they had would fly here.
Okay, well, good thing I don't eat there. Anyway.
Yeah. I do miss it.
Aw. That's your addiction to the pink slime talking.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think what I was hearing is that if America wants people like you to like want to come back, then we
Yeah.
need to take care of them.
Yeah, just take
I
care
mean,
of your
it sounds pretty
people.
simple.
Just give a shit. Like, really.
Yes. Like, get your shit together.
Yeah,
Care
yeah.
whether I live or
Also,
die.
I don't
Hmm.
even know how this hasn't come up yet, but like, guns, guns, guns. Like, we don't have guns here hardly at all. I've never once been afraid of a gun in Australia.
Hmm.
Like, I've never even thought about it because back in the 80s, I think it was the 80s or 90s, I don't know exactly when, maybe it was 70s. Um, there was a mass shooting, and
Hmm.
this kid went out and shot a bunch of random people with a rifle, and the government acted, and they said, anyone who brings their rifles in, we're gonna pay you for it. Everyone turn in your guns. So like, basically, they got like 80% of the guns just gone, and they
Wow.
just destroyed them, and they paid people for it, and then they started passing legislation for if you have a gun, you it has to be in a lockbox, and that lockbox has to be bolted into the ground. Like you can't just
Oh.
pick that thing up and leave it. Most people who have guns
Wow.
leave it at like like a shooting range or something. They'll leave them there in a lockbox. And it's very strict on who can have it. Like I actually haven't looked into it much, but I'm pretty sure I could get a gun if I wanted to. It just the laws around it are so strict. You can't buy a semi-automatic rifle here,
Hmm.
um, and because of that, we have not had a mass shooting in Australia, I think, since.
That's incredible.
Yeah, yeah,
And you know what? I say that's incredible. What's incredible is that we in the States routinely have these shootings, but don't do anything about it.
don't do
That's what's
anything
incredible.
about it, and
Yeah.
it feels so. Just feels like you're losing your mind. You're like, why can we just keep doing this and not have any change? Like it's the same thing with
Yeah.
like the policing system. It's like the day that that George Floyd killer got
Chauvin.
Chauvin got read the uh, prosecuted. I guess what am I saying?
When he was charged?
When he was charged, the
Or
same
when he was
day was
convicted? Which one are you?
when he was convicted. Sorry, it's like
Okay.
the same
Okay.
day there was someone else shot. Like it's just
Yes.
it's just never ending. It feels like it's just like why are we keep doing the same thing and expecting different results, or why we're not doing
Or
we're
why
just
do we
keep
do nothing and then act
what
surprised every time it happens
yes
again?
yeah
Yeah.
and I
Okay.
feel
So you
like
might not be moving back to America anytime soon.
I I know it will bring me back someday. It's
Hmm.
calling. Um, America's a bitch, and she's gonna bring me back one day.
I'm like, don't pick
Drag
up
me
the
back.
phone when she calls. It sounds really great over there.
Just that girlfriend I can't break up with.
um,
um, yeah.
well, as always, towards the ends of these conversations, I ask, what can someone who's listening do to support you, or an organization that you support, or maybe what's one thing that you want people to take away from the conversation?
Um, I guess I just don't. Oftentimes, I feel really hopeless about the
Oh,
differences of these two countries, but I feel like in the last year or so, like I feel like there's been so much. good change that's happened in America too, that, you know, we can't just gloss over. You know, there's so many people of color who have won races in places that no one thought they could. And I feel like the landscape of America is changing as long as we keep fighting for it. And it's not, you know, a moot point. You know, like I feel like we can do it. And if anything, like that's kind of the reason I want to come back to America, to help change it, you know? And from a different perspective, to bring that in and be like, hey, you know, like people love to say, well, that wouldn't work here. And you're like, why? Why wouldn't it work here? Like,
Right.
I lived in a country where it worked. It worked fine. Like, and
I think lived experience is really powerful. And if you wanted to come back on a work visa or an activism visa of some kind, and let people know that things can be different. You know, for instance, Minnesota has had vote by mail here for ages. But when I lived in Georgia, because of the voter suppression that I just kind of endured, I did not trust the vote by mail like process here when I moved. I was like, you guys are all ridiculous. How do you know they're even going to count your ballot? And they looked at me like I was crazy. And then in subsequent elections, with all of the actual kind of voter fraud and voter intimidation and elections official intimidation that was going on, even specifically in Georgia, those same people are like, oh, okay, things here are good in terms of, you know, this one issue. Things in other places are not great. And I think maybe if we could have more of that crab in the bucket mentality, but in a more positive way, where it was like, no, you know, you can't crawl out into voter suppression. You can't crawl out into, you know, these crazy relaxed gun restrictions or what have you. Maybe America would be substantially better off.
Yeah, I mean, and when Georgia went blue, I think this is a perfect example. Like, Georgia went blue. Like, that's didn't seem like it was going to happen. Like, it just was ridiculous when it happened. And I was so excited, so beside myself when it did happen. But, you know, like, that has to do with people fight, like Stacey Abrams and Fair Fight. Like, I think that organization is amazing. And I think things like that where like where your vote does matter, you just have to do it, you know? Like, if everyone really went and voted, we would have probably a different country.
Well, I do think that message of if everyone went and voted, we'd have a different country. I do think that landed in Georgia. I think what subsequently happened, or is happening, is that Republican legislators in Georgia are now saying, oh, well, in that case, it has to become much more difficult for you to vote now that that message is actually landed. But what I'm not seeing are like the governor of Minnesota or Oregon or California saying to Georgia, you know, cut that shit out. Right? But I hear us saying, oh, wow, that's really unfortunate that those people have to deal with that or what have you, as if, you know, it's one common America, everybody. Like, we are literally all in this together. And I mean, if those restrictions go unchecked, then we're just going to end up back into that same dystopian nightmare that we just got out of just 100 days ago.
The federal government used to be able to, like, tell the southern states that, hey, knock it off, you can't do that, you know? And there was this law, I don't know exactly which one it was, but it was when Obama was in office that they just stopped passing it because they were like, oh, no, we don't need this anymore. It's so arcane, you know? And so they stopped, you know, they stopped renewing it. I think it was every 8 years.
Reauthorizing it,
Yes. And so now, these states are like, oh, we have free reign to do whatever we want. Let's see what we can get away with, And I feel like there has been a lot of backlash, which has been good. Not enough to make them change it back, but
Mm-hmm.
I really hope it kind of tints the 2022 governor election. I really hope Stacey gets in there and can just like stick it. Like I hope that whole thing is a smear on is it Kemp, his campaign?
It is Kemp, but it will be a much harder battle for Miss Abrams if those restrictions are put in place.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Well, this has been a beautiful, wonderful conversation. I'm totally going to have you back because we barely scratched the surface on everything that we could talk about, even in just the area of like comparative politics. But I did have one question that did not appear on the outline that was texted over from a Mr. Trey Pasquariello, your brother.
Oh no.
But don't worry, it is a softball. He just says he misses you, and will you please text him and let him know when you are coming to visit?
Yes. I will. I have to get vaccinated first, I think.
Oh my gosh, you haven't been vaccinated?
Oh yeah, we didn't even get into vaccination. No, we don't have vaccines yet. We have a few vaccines for medical officials, but we're kind of a slow roll to get there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay, that means you'll probably be working from home for a while, and so you'll be very available for more podcast episodes.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Tell him I hope I'm there by Christmas.
You can tell him yourself. Nick Pasquariello at What If Nick on Instagram. You are amazing. Thank you so much for joining this morning.
Thanks for having me. I love you.
I love you too.
See you next time.
See you next time.